Breaking right now at 5, we are taking a live look from New York, where the captured Venezuelan president has just landed. Multiple agencies are on the scene right now after deplaning. President Nicolas Maduro and his wife will be going to New York City, where they will face multiple federal charges for drug trafficking. We see some movement there at the door of the plane. The couple was captured by U.S. forces overnight. Sources say they were dragged from the bedroom. The United States also launched multiple missile attacks on the country in South America. We're taking a look at satellite images now over Venezuela before and after the U.S. strikes. The incident has stunned many global leaders. We have some photos there of the president. President Trump said just hours ago the U.S. would, quote, run Venezuela until there can be a peaceful transition of power. Still a lot to learn about this. Jen Sullivan reports on the attack and what is set to happen next.
This video, released by the Department of Defense, captures the moment the U.S. first strikes a Venezuelan boat that the U.S. government says was carrying illegal drugs. The White House now saying that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized U.S. Navy Admiral Frank Bradley to act. While speaking at an event in California Saturday, Secretary Hegseth defended the Trump administration's actions.
If you're working for a designated terrorist organization and you bring drugs to this country in a boat, we will find you and we will sink you.
Since September, the U.S. military has destroyed 23 boats, killing at least 87 people. All say were tied to drug trafficking. Some strikes, particularly a second on this same boat, are drawing criticism.
You don't need that kind of firepower to do that tactical.
In the September 2nd attack, 11 people were reportedly on the boat. After a first strike, 2 survivors were seen clinging to the wreckage, according to some who have seen video of the full attack. Then, more strikes, killing them and sinking the vessel. It is considered a war crime to kill shipwrecked people. Now, many are scrutinizing what happened and are calling for an investigation.
These are, in my opinion, criminal actions or should be investigated as such.
Sources familiar with Bradley's remarks say he told lawmakers the small boat that was hit was heading towards a larger vessel that was bound for Suriname, a small South American country east of Venezuela, known by U.S. drug enforcement officials as a route for drugs headed to Europe. Bradley reportedly telling lawmakers the 2 survivors did not appear to have a radio. They watched the men struggle to overturn what was left of the boat, and there was no position to make a distress call.
There are still big questions about whether this is a legitimate approach, simply going after all manner of drug facilities.
Both the House and Senate Armed Services Committees have launched inquiries into what happened. Jen Sullivan, Atlanta News First.